Jump into this today. There's not going to be too much backstory, but the other videos I'm going to be making soon, a lot of backstory. A lot. I'm going to jump in. Today we're going to talk about gaslighting and narcissism. Get ready for that one. Good morning and welcome to Psych Talk with Sean, where we talk psychology and then some. I'm your host, Sean Hupel, and today we are going to be diving into something that's going to be both uncomfortable and revealing. Alright? You know what? I can't say any of the jokes that are coming to mind. But if you're over 18, I'm sure you've got a couple yourself. So, the long story short is we're going to be covering narcissism and gaslighting. Because those are big things right now. Like big. So, let's start with the easy one. What is a narcissist? A narcissist is basically somebody who is really entangled with themselves. Like, you remember Jada Pinkett, like Will Smith's wife, who had that one. You know what? We're not even gonna get into the tabloids or nothing like that, or I guess online tabloids is what they are now. You go to Facebook and it's like, boom, here's a story. Click on the link. But yeah, let's talk about entanglements. So narcissism is where a person is entangled with themselves. They can't see outside themselves, really, or they don't want to. And you know what? To some degree, I can relate to that. In fact, I think all autists can relate to some degree. Because there's a reason they use the word autistic. But my kind are often confused with narcissists and sociopaths because we tend to stand off from people. But the difference is, actually, let's go back a little bit further, because this is something I can directly identify with. So as a kid, as a child, I tested boundaries. It's why I became a very good video game tester when I did. We explore limits. And in exploring those limits, we learn more about ourselves and our environment, right? But until we learn empathy as kids, we don't have the ability or capacity to recognize other people empathetically. What does that mean? That means we can't feel what other people are feeling, and we would see other human beings equivalent to like an animal, okay? Like your parents, your family, your cousins, all that. They would be equivalent to like a family dog or cat. True story. That's how, like, they're seen as a means to an end with younger autists, but also with all of you. You were all sociopathic at one point. Why? Because mommy is like, I want sleep, and you're like, I want milk. And that's kind of what it was. By the way, that wasn't a sound effect. But when it comes to narcissism, basically, it's a lack of empathy. Now, is it a true lack of empathy? Not in most cases. Like, the thing is, like, you have the shotgun approach with psychology where, well, this kind of makes sense by the numbers. But they don't really go into the humanity anymore. It's been a qualm of mine with the psychological community for a long time, is the humanity is ignored. And so you got this blanket approach where we're basically over-classifying people. So true narcissists that have absolutely no choice in it, that is a brain misfunction, meaning that you can actually do an MRI, or you can do EEG or EKG. Electrocardiograph? No, that's the wrong one. So EEG, which is how you basically measure brainwaves. You measure the electrical activity on the surface of the brain to determine the electrical activity inside the brain. Essentially, that's the short and skinny of it. But when you have a situation where a person has a genuine deformity, that's understandable. After that, narcissism becomes a choice. Now, is it one of those where you can be kind of imposed into it by your environment? Yeah. I've said in a past episode that I kind of feel bad for wealthy people, because as much as I've struggled in life, they will never feel fulfillment, a lot of them. And that's because they've had everything handed to them. And in a previous episode, I talk about stress and how we need stress. Our brains need stress. If you don't work out your brain, guess what? Dementia, Alzheimer's, and other mental degenerative disorders. If you don't work out your muscles, guess what? They atrophy. And eventually, narc something. Man, I can't think of the term where basically your muscles start wasting away or eating themselves away. But yeah, that comes from disuse or unused muscles. And your brain is very much a muscle. Okay, kind of like how glass is the slowest moving liquid in the world. Your brain is the slowest moving muscle, but it is a muscle. And it does require maintenance and it does require growth. But narcissism is like when you have a genuine mental issue, like when you have a physically noticeable or chemical imbalance or whatnot to create this situation of narcissism, then yeah, that's fully understandable. But there are people that don't have that, or there are people that engineer their own chemical imbalance, which puts them into a negative spiral to where they can't get out of narcissism. They can't even recognize it. In fact, I know a few people like that. And unfortunately, I called them friends at one point, and both of them I had to cut off because they're just the games they play, even with people they care about. So narcissism is a lack of empathy. It's seeking out one's personal benefit. So for example, let's say you're of the philosophy of, guess what, I'm going to die and bye-bye. Okay, well in that philosophy, enjoy the heck out of life. I profoundly believe that's incorrect, but the evidence that I have to support my stance isn't the evidence that most people will have or will have access to anymore. We're going to go into gaslighting in a second. But there are a lot of documents that can't be found online anymore that were easily accessible 15, 20 years ago. But I've been studying all my life, so I mean that kind of goes with the territory, right? Bourbon barrel aged by Columbia. But man, they changed. They had this like lumberjack guy on the front of their coffee and whatnot. It's just like, gosh, this even looks like it's bourbon barrel aged. And then they decide to go all PC with it, and oh, look at these pretty colors. And that's just like, all right. I mean, do you? Good for you. I just feel like from a branding standpoint, that was a poor move. But I still love Columbia. Like bourbon barrel aged, you're never getting rid of that from me until the company gets rid of it. You know what I mean? Please don't. I say that, knock on wood, because so many things we fall in love with get removed from the menu or get removed as a show. Firefly is a big one. If you look up the show Firefly and Serenity, which Serenity became a movie when it was supposed to be the second season. And there's still a following online that's just hugely avid. Thank God they finished up Babylon 5, though, because I belong to that community, and it was by far the greatest sci-fi action drama series, period. Deep Space Nine was based on Babylon 5, and that is a true story. Factual. Look it up. Babylon 5 and Deep Space Nine. Star Trek. Sorry, just had to nerd out for a second, because we're going to go into something serious. And I wanted to get myself a little bit happier. So, narcissists, they gaslight. Why? Because they don't view other humans as equal. They view themselves as priority because a lot of them think that, okay, this is it. There is no next life and nothing like that. There is no spirituality and nothing like that. And all those people that have been talking for thousands of years and all these accounts, and man, I used to be with them. I used to genuinely be an atheist. For a little bit. But there's just way too much evidence to the contrary. No, we're not going to talk about religion on here. Okay, I'm just throwing this out there because religion does, or the principal tenets of religion, especially with an autist like myself, they're a great foundation for developing empathy, which is our ability to understand and relate to other people. The ability to put ourselves in their shoes. A narcissist has a challenge doing that because seeing outside themselves, it's almost foreign to consider for a lot of narcissists that other people are equals, and those that they do consider equals are usually in their close friend circle, their clique. And we've talked about tribalism and cliques and whatnot, which, you know, it's funny, in narcissism especially, like, we are a narcissistic country. When you're capitalistic and you're unchecked in your capitalism, which is exactly what's going on right now, which is exactly why we have the challenges with the labor force that we have, you have narcissists at the top. Why? Because that's all they were seeking. They were seeking to be at the top, get comfort, get advantage, live a long life, but also have a heck of a lot of fun. I get that. You see, I'm on a mission to help other people, not help myself. And that's the big one. They are on a mission to help themselves first. They come first. In every scenario, they come first. If it's life or death, guess what? Their kids are not going to live because they are a narcissist. I'm going to repeat that. A narcissist, their kids will not live because they are a narcissist. They are self-centered, self-righteous, self-everything, and they do not admit wrong. Because to admit wrong is to say, oh, I did something wrong, and to give somebody else potential advantage. I've been there, and I've been that person trying to avoid that. Okay, so let's dive into it. So let's say you get disenfranchised in front of somebody else, right? In a previous episode, and if you're not familiar with all of the episodes, Autistic Commando on YouTube, you can catch the previous episodes. I believe CCTV also carries those previous episodes. But the long story short is, I'm autistic, and I had a bit of a slow learning process, so I can definitely relate to narcissism to a degree. But then it was trained out of me. And thank God for my grandma. She was going to be an actual nun. But when it comes to the ego is an on and off switch. And it's a self-defense mechanism that doesn't distinguish between self and self-image. Meaning if somebody diminishes your self-image, then your ego is like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I am bad. You kidding me? And the ego wants to respond. And when the ego responds, usually it's aggressive, especially with narcissists. Because when, let's say, a person like my best friend, he and I, like, seriously, we will throw every type of joke at each other. We've known each other since we were 6 years old. There are no limits. Gender is not a limit. I mean, we're the same gender, but we make fun of each other for not being. Like, we are just brothers. And we bust each other like brothers, right? But do we bust each other in public? Do we say personal things in public about each other? Hell no. Why would we? Why would we? Seriously. Because when let's say we start talking about each other and somebody else says, aha, like people are wont to do. People want to feel advantaged over somebody else because we've got a glass ceiling in America. And that's the narcissistic capitalism. So when you get diminished in front of other people, you go from embarrassed to, which embarrassment, I've covered this in a previous episode too, embarrassment is where, oh, I did something wrong. And you feel self-aware of your fault, of the mistake you just made, right? But humiliation is where other people get in on it. That's where other people are trying to bring you down through projected schadenfreude. Projected schadenfreude, that's colloquially known as, we like to see a hero fall, right? I really encourage going to YouTube, looking up Autistic Commando, and if it says Psych Talk on it, I would recommend watching through those because we're covering a lot of ground that's already been covered. And that's so I'm going to be moving pretty fast with some of this stuff, just to be perfectly fair. But yeah, so when it comes to the whole narcissism thing and all of that, they don't want to be embarrassed. But even so, they don't want to feel wrong. There's an illusion of grandeur with narcissists. They always think they're right, and when they gain advantage over another person through projected schadenfreude, which is also known as bullying, and it can come in multiple different forms. The passive-aggressive is what narcissists tend to prefer, because they tend to work in the subtle. If they go out loud, or if they're loud about something, like really, really public, that's because they perceptively have somebody dead to rights as far as embarrassing them and making the narcissist making themselves feel better about themselves or look better. Okay, so gaslighting. So narcissists, they're just selfish. They're selfish people, okay? They focus on self, and we're not going to talk into fixing narcissism and all of that. That's going to be another episode at some point. But it's going to be wrapped into something else, and I'll just briefly mention narcissism as far as correcting that behavior. Because in the case of narcissists that aren't biologically narcissistic, our capitalistic country basically rewards narcissists. Okay? Think about this one, okay? There's hip-hop, there's music, there's the music industry. And you know how many people wanted to be either a music video girl or the rapper in front, and all the misogyny to go with it? Like, seriously. Excuse me. I need coffee. Coffee. But we had the music industry, and we've got celebrities, right? And do you know where the word fan comes from? It comes from fanatic. Do you know where fanatic comes from? That's someone who holds zealous zeal in defending or promoting another individual or ideology. Yeah. I told you we were going to go deep, but we're also going to go fast. So the reason we have fanatics is a sense of envy. We want to be those people. And we admire those people, and we want to admire their traits, admire what made them so great. But they're not really great. I know actual actors. Some of them are humble as all get out. Oh my God, they are like Jay Christopher. He's probably one of the nicest people I've ever met. What was her name? Monica Calhoun. Oh, she is sweet as all get out. Very. And she will talk with actual fans if you get in touch with her. Erica Alexander, she was on Living Single. She's a fun person too. I mean, we had a brief conversation. Like, I wouldn't consider her a friend or an acquaintance. But we've met. And I've met plenty of other celebrities in multiple different fields. Okay, we're talking regular film and adult film. I like to network with people, and I like to hear people's stories because you get to learn from those stories. It's actually pretty awesome. And when you look at all these different industries in entertainment, and we are very much an entertainment-driven country, we're an insecure country overall because people are just so insecure and projecting those insecurities. But we're also a very narcissistic country because we're capitalistic, celebrating narcissism, or the promotion of self instead of us. It's why we're in this whole global warming thing and all that. I mean, whether you believe it or not, it's common. And there's, like, seriously, it's one of those where it's got to be corrected on the macro level. Otherwise, it's just, like, we're going to see a decent reduction in the human population with the things that are going to be coming. You know, I'm not terribly afraid of that, but I'm also not a narcissist. And with this capitalistic society, when people want, the thing is, people just keep wanting. They're not happy, they're not content with where they are, they want. And we are taught to want. We are taught to strive. We are taught to hoard. Hoard money, hoard possessions. That is narcissism. Where you hoard and you are benefiting yourself above other people. Yeah. A little 2 plus 2 here. Left foot, right foot. You got this. So when it comes to the whole narcissism thing, it's hard not to be in this culture and be the definition of what we call success. Success is being financially independent, but we've got glass ceilings, and we basically have, I don't like to say the word slave operator system, but kind of. I mean, job, just over broke. That actually made sense as an acronym. And that's exactly where people have been kept. And now that we realize, oh, you don't have to be just over broke. Like McDonald's and all of those fast food places are actually paying living wages with healthcare benefits and all of that. For now. And living wage, man. And even the fact that $15 an hour is barely a living wage, that should tell you something about our capitalistic society and the fact that people were still earning minimum wage. Think about that for a second. I was one of those people that had to work 2 jobs just to keep a roof over my head. Much less to gain anything, but I was still working my tail off to to have more, to gain more, to get more experience and exposure. Because if you aren't dressed a certain way, if you aren't carrying yourself a certain way, if you don't have this much money, or you don't drive this car, or you don't have all these other things that are tied into it, then you're just not worth it, right? We have that societal bias, and that's all based around narcissism. There was, I forget the psychologist. This psychologist was a friend of Dr. Bandy X. Lee, which I am very much a fan of hers, a fanatic, because I love her bravery in coming out the way she did. And she was basically calling out the sociopathy and narcissism of the previous administration and his family. And I know children of millionaires and billionaires. They were my clients. Millionaires and billionaires were my clients. Well, billionaires, they weren't really, that wasn't really a client. It was more of an acquaintance through a client. But I've seen inside their families. I've seen how they interact with each other. I know the games. I've played them. There are narcissistic, controlling games going on at all times, and there are people in the higher society that are constantly looking over their shoulder for their every word. Because they know if they say something wrong or disclose something wrong to the wrong person, it'll be used against them later on, because it's a narcissistic society at the top more than anywhere else in American society, period. Or anywhere in the world. The wealthier you get, the more narcissism you're going to see. So how does that tie into gaslighting? Vaccines are unsafe. You don't need a mask. Let me go into that one. So let me put this into perspective. You know those people that were saying, no, it's a mask, it's because cross. Well, those people, they don't have medical degrees. The people who do have medical degrees understand why. And they haven't done a great job of explaining the mask thing and whatnot, because you don't see too many illustrations or demonstrations saying, hey, I blow into my hand. Wow, without a mask, I can feel it. Then you put on a mask. I actually did a TikTok video on this, back when masks were still a thing. And yeah, when you have a mask on, it diminishes the airflow outward, like how much you disperse droplets in the air. Especially with, and now we got the Delta variant, man. And people are still saying, I don't want to wear a mask. Yeah. What that basically says is my convenience is more important to me than your life, your family's life, or any stranger's life. I want to feel good while I'm shopping. Those 15 minutes I'm shopping, I want to feel good. And that's one of those, sorry about that, I need to mute that sucker. But I'm not going to take it off because, to err is human. But the long story short of it is, we are in such a narcissistic society that we aren't willing to brave wearing a mask while shopping in order to potentially save somebody else's life. Narcissists, or would-be aspiring narcissists, were the ones saying, I have privilege. My privilege matters more to me than potentially somebody else's life, because I am now an expert, and how dare you tell me I'm not? How dare you? And then they get their crowd around them. That's the whole alpha-beta complex. Now, whether it's natural or naturalized, it is very present in American culture, and it's also based on narcissism, the alpha-beta complex. And it's real. I'll prove it any day of the week, anytime, anywhere. I have. I've done it on panels and forums. And that's the thing, the alpha-beta complex and narcissism, they're just hand in hand, but they feed each other. But then you have the previous administration where, I forget the niece's name, but she is an actual medical doctor. And she's calling out the narcissism in her family. And I can call out the sociopathy and narcissism in my family, and we were barely middle class. It's a unique thing to see, to really look at from the outside and to just observe other people's behavior. But when we do observe other people's behavior, what ends up happening is, if we really look at them, we can see their behavior and compare it to ours. A narcissist can't really do that. let's forward that to reality, right? Reality is blank, right? It's insert here, this is the reality. Well, what the previous administration was trying to do in order to galvanize the base, and we're going to go into that in a second too, is they were using charge words, because people that are living in a capitalistic and narcissistic society want more. They want more. And in that aspiration for more, when you run the risk of taking away from them, that's when we get angry. Anger is a response to something we want to protect. We can get sad about something we've lost, but anger is what we engage when we want to protect something, ourselves or somebody else or something else. And things matter more nowadays, apparently, than people. And that's a dang shame. But ultimately, what we run into is, how to say this one? So, when you have this narcissistic society where people are constantly and frequently just basically striving for more, but there's a glass ceiling, when you can inspire fear of losing something, losing your liberties, losing your freedom, losing to a colloquialism. That was the previous episode. Again, Autistic Commando on YouTube if you want to follow up on it. Or go through CCTV's YouTube channel. They should have it or something. But, yeah, when you run the risk of losing things, like, that's what you do to people when they're down. When they're struggling, when they're depressed, when they're fearful, when they feel like there's a glass ceiling and they can't achieve Maslow's hierarchy, which is self-actualization. The ability to do what you love and make a living at it. To have an adequate amount of stress, not too much, not too little. Healthy stress. Because I work very well on deadlines. In fact, I give myself deadlines if nobody else does. And it's a unique thing to watch all these people striving for the top, and it's like crabs in a barrel. And what's funny is I've spoken to people at the top and actually gotten one or two to open up. The second one, it was more hinting at, but one of them really just opened up. And in that case, I say, thank the Lord for tequila. I mean, that person could hold their liquor, but they couldn't hold their tongue. And I got to hear the inside view from the top of how, and I've been halfway to the top. I've gone to private schools. I've met those people too. And there is a distinct looking down upon other people. Like as a kid, I was taught by Fox News and other sources that black folks were thugs. That was the word that whenever you heard thug, you knew it was a black person that they were talking about on the news. That's the 90s and 2000s that I grew up in, right? We were taught to look down on other people. And it's reinforced when you're at the top and you're not exposed to other people at the bottom or any of the real struggles. And it puts you into kind of a bubble. But we're going to get into that. Actually, you know what? Let's do that. So self-actualization on the bottom, people are crabs in a barrel just trying to get one over on each other and are very fearful and very easily manipulated. All you got to do is just threaten to take something else away from them when they're striving to reach more. And all of a sudden, you can get them fearful as all get out in this narcissistic society where people don't want to end up homeless. Now at the top, the narcissism there is a disregard. They don't, like the thing about humanity that they've been saying, that the ancients have been saying for thousands of years, and we've been repeating pretty much every generation, is that the automation of humanity is giving us way too much convenience and taking away from humans. I'm starting to get the understanding for that. But it's one of those where when people don't have to strive for more, they generally don't. And then they lead these unfulfilled lives, they get estranged from their children, so on and so forth. I have seen it over and over again. But part of the reason of the estrangement is the same reason I'm never talking to family again. It's called gaslighting. Gaslighting is where basically you try to convince somebody that what they know to be true is not true. So we know that to have doctor in front of your name, or PhD behind, that means that you've spent at least 8 years studying a very specialized topic, and you've become a literal expert in that topic. Now, the people at the bottom wanted to maintain what little privilege they had, and so they were whipped up into a fear frenzy about the mask is just the first step. Don't wear the mask. Enjoy your privilege. And keep in mind, the people who own these news networks, and I know this sounds like conspiracy stuff and all that, but again, I'm telling you that I've seen, and I've talked, like, there are really nice millionaires and billionaires out there. My uncle's a really genuinely kind-hearted millionaire. He is. Okay, he and I don't really talk, but that's also because of gaslighting. And gaslighting is kind of like narcissistic projection. So, kind of like how the narcissist never wants to be wrong, they never want to be embarrassed, they always want to be in control and be right in the situation. Gaslighting is how they do it. So there's this thing called Neuro-Linguistic Programming. I used to be an NLP practitioner. It's known as NLP. And Neuro-Linguistic, 2 plus 2 here. And I used to be a practitioner of it because I used to work in marketing, brand image development, and I used to do little odd jobs here and there. Nothing illicit or anything like that, but morally challenged would definitely be a term for it. It's why I got out of that industry, is that type of consulting I just wasn't into. It's not something that I even brag about anymore, but I use it more as an example, cautionary. But yeah, when you work as somebody in consulting for the wealthier folks, or when you work as a fixer, then what ends up happening is you get to see behind the scenes of how people do what they do. I mean, I've dealt with in Southside Chicago, for example, and I'm going to sidetrack and get back to it. But in Southside Chicago, the narcissism, even in the church, is real. And I actually know one of the apostles that you have to go through his church if you want to get elected anywhere in Southside Chicago. He's one of 8 churches that you must go through if you want to get elected in Southside. And that's just an understood thing. You need to get the endorsement of these people who never worked in politics, but somehow worked their way into it because they have a flock of followers. And there's narcissism there too. I mean, there are good pastors and there are bad ones. I personally know both. And then you've got gaslighting. So a lot of the tactics with gaslighting are to convince a person that what they saw was something else. Kind of like, we've just gotten federal confirmation of UFOs, right? It wasn't a weather balloon. But the weather balloon was gaslighting. And it was convenient to listen to, wasn't it? Because gaslighting works especially well when at least one of the parties that's being gaslit wants to believe what they're hearing. In fact, it's very easy, surprisingly easy. I encourage looking up Darren Brown on YouTube. He basically reenacted and proved that the JFK assassination could have been some like MK Ultra type stuff. Seriously, like there's a comedian named Stephen Fry, and he spent 2 weeks brainwashing a volunteer, and that volunteer went into the theater, picked up a gun with blanks in it, was given the command, stood up, held the gun out in front of an entire audience, and shot Stephen Fry, who play-acted that he was dead. And then they showed the guy at the video afterwards, and he's like, I don't remember. But gaslighting is a real thing, and it can come in many, many different forms. But ultimately, gaslighting is, at least in the political form right now, which is what America is dealing with. We've got the Delta wave coming through, and in political form, gaslighting is basically convincing somebody that their ideology is correct. But let's take a look at that for example, like the current Republican Party. And I'm not going to bash on any particular party because I am an old school Republican at heart. I lean more on the other side right now just because of where politics is, but America as a country is right compared to like any other country. Seriously, we are a very right-leaning country. Even the left is right-leaning. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people that are seeking, like for example, commentators, they are seeking advantage. And by seeking advantage and through seeking advantage, they are effectively, they're incentivized to gaslight people. They are very much, these commentators are incentivized, like, Don Lemon, okay? He does dramatic pauses more than somebody that doesn't know how to speak. I mean, seriously, I have never seen somebody dramatically pause that many times for that long. And then you've got the other side of the political spectrum, Tucker Carlson. That man has a past. But people listen to him because they want to listen to him. They want to believe what he's saying. It's convenient. And why is it convenient? Because narcissistic tendencies. They want to look out for themselves and their own privilege and their convenience. They want to feel like they have privilege. In fact, I firmly believe that that's also the center of the black-white argument in America that's going on right now. Is a lot of folks recognize that equality means a diminishment of privilege. Because again, in a previous episode, I talked about how the ego is, again, on and off switch, but even the slightest bit of diminishment flips that on and off switch. So for example, let's say you embarrass somebody in public, right? You humiliate them, or you see them humiliated. Well, we actually do get a sense of satisfaction. This has been measured scientifically. Okay, they've done the brain scans and all of that, and we get a sense of pleasure by seeing somebody else disenfranchised. Colloquially, it was known as wanting to see a hero fail. But nowadays, it's a little bit different than that. It's just wanting to see someone fail. Because even though there's 8 billion people in the world, that one person diminished because of how our ego works, we feel better about it. Which is kind of a sad thing. And through the sense of privilege and through gaslighting, we can be inspired to do some really incredible things. Like January 6th, where we stormed the Capitol as a country. Like, there are people of our country that stormed the Capitol and killed police officers, beating them with American flags, saying, "Blue lives matter, why aren't you doing it right?" These non-experts who weren't ever in the field, who've never served their country, now think that they're serving their country by following somebody who gaslit them. The election was never stolen. I know people who work in elections. I know one of the people that founded the electronic ballot system. I know one of them, personally. I know people at the state level. Okay, this election was one of the more secure out there, period. And we've got one heck of a framework for future elections. Like, wow, they've really knocked it out the park. And you guys don't know it because you don't know people in those circles. I do, and I can tell you, wow, they are killing it. But gaslighting is how all those people went to the Capitol on January 6th and thought that they were doing a good thing. Now, gaslighting in that case happened from multiple different avenues, okay? You had one news station that appealed to a very specific base and has been engineering that appeal and that specific base for a long time. In fact, I was almost a part of that base at one point. And thankfully, a few friends told me, hey, do a little bit of research. And then I did, and wow. But that's kind of where it all boils down to, is when you don't know what to believe, then what do you do? Where do you go? And if you've got two different options, which one are you going to choose? The one that, well, these people over here, like, are you going to choose the one that you don't want to do? Or are you going to choose the one that you do want to do? And the narcissism is doing what you want to do, like not getting vaccinated or not wearing a mask, at the potential detriment of somebody dying, or people, plural, dying. But you're never going to meet those people. You're never going to meet their families. You're never going to meet the grandma that died, or the mother that died, or the child that died. You're never going to meet them. So, I mean, who cares, right? And that's where we are. We are the type of society that will walk past a homeless person saying they're hungry and just walk. And you see, I'm not able to do that. Morally, it would leave a moral wound for me. In fact, when I was driving Uber and Lyft in Seattle, I wasn't doing too great financially. I mean, I was networking and I was doing some stuff. But I also knew that I was taking a financial hit. And I remember walking by the Triple Door. It's this this club that sometimes has performance actors and whatnot. Like, the Triple Door is pretty cool. And if you're in Seattle, I do recommend it. Believe it or not, that's the first time I ever had a lavender martini and didn't regret my life decisions. I'm still not going back to a lavender martini, but at the same time, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't horrible. And there was a guy outside, and I remember being about to walk past him. And then I heard, "I'm just hungry." And he sounded like he was crying. So I got him some food. I went inside, ordered some food, brought it back out to him. But not all of us are cut from that same cloth. Again, I was raised by a woman who was going to be a literal nun. True story. Like, she was 2 weeks away from being a literal nun when she met my grandfather. And I guess, my grandfather wasn't the nicest person, but that also happened after the war. And that's back in that war. I think it was the Korean War or something like that. I don't know. But he went to war. And he didn't come back the same. In fact, he came back, he was known as the drunk that was never drunk. I guess my grandmother's relationship is proof that opposites attract, I guess. But gaslighting is where you want to convince somebody else that something is true when it's not. And there are people that are very skilled at it. I used to be one of them. True story. And it's not hard to convince somebody when they want to believe. When they really, really want to believe in something, or to believe a convenient fact, then all of a sudden it becomes a fact. I talked about this when I mentioned the colloquial in a previous episode, but yeah, colloquialism, that's that's where we take a concept and we give it a word. We define it. And we've been doing that for a long time. I just never thought I'd see it in this country as much as we're seeing it now. Because think about something. Those dirty Democrats. Those friggin' Republicans. When did we get here where we're not talking? Where we're not talking to each other, and where we're not having healthy debate? When did we get to this point? And why are we here? Well, the why is easy. We're a capitalistic country, and we very much drive ourselves on narcissism, which narcissism requires regular conflict. Without regular conflict, there's no sense of control, because you can't control the conflict. You can't control the insecurities. And by keeping people insecure, you can keep them under your thumb. I'm going to throw that at you again. By keeping people insecure, you can keep them under your thumb. And we are a very insecure nation. And, I mean, I'll give you a great example. The next time you hear a politician say trickle-down economics, vote for the other person. It's never worked. It will never work, because of narcissism at the top. There is a reason we have laws. The reason we have laws is that something has happened so many times that we recognize it as a problem. A problem that will not be addressed without a law and punishment system in place. That's why we have it. We have a system of punishment for poor behavior. The problem is, when you can alter what's considered poor behavior, I mean, that's why I'm guessing some people became politicians. Because I'll give you a great example, right? It pays to write the laws. There's a guy in Oregon that I was actually contacting him when I was working on a back-end cannabis project. And, I mean, it's a viable market. Like, whether you use it or not, that's one heck of a market that's emerging. And he positioned himself extremely well because he owns a dispensary, he owns a grow, he owns dispensary, grow, and a production facility. He owns all three of them, which in Washington you can only own one. But out here you can own all three, and he's also one of the people that wrote the law. It pays to be the person to write the laws. And that's what a lot of politicians are leaning on. That's why they get campaign donations, and sometimes those donations make it to their extra accounts and all of that. And we've been playing with the tax system for a long time. I mean, that last tax run where basically the big corporations didn't pay anything, wow. You want to talk about a detriment to America, that was it. That cost America so much money. But then again, the small people still get to pay, so why not? And that's narcissism at play. Narcissists will find gaslighters. Like narcissists with money or with power or with influence. See, I don't like to use the word power because they really don't have any. They have the power we give them as a society. But we're accepting poor behavior, and we're not checking poor behavior. And ultimately, it's creating a gas ceiling for the rest of us. So what do we do about that? Like, what can we do, right? What is the next step on this one? How do we defeat narcissism, and how do we recognize gaslighting? All right, I'm taking a quick pause. All right, let's jump back into it. So what we can do about this is learn to recognize gaslighting and challenge what we're being told. Okay, that takes a little bit extra time to go look things up, which is what pretty much every religion has ever told us to do. Even the Bible says to keep researching, but when you go into non-religions, like just cultural teachings and whatnot, they still say always be learning, always be researching, question everything. Shoot, heard it on the grapevine. Even songs say that. Gosh, what are the exact lyrics? Believe half of what you hear, or half of what you see and none of what you hear, right? That makes sense. It does, because people are, like, you have commentators out there and you have narcissistic people in this society where everybody's trying to climb over each other just to get that one little bit of break so that they can magically have that house and that car and all those luxuries and the pool. We don't need all that. And some people aren't happy with themselves, which is why they seek external validation. That external validation could be something they're doing, something they possess, or how other people see them. Because in this narcissistic society, everybody wants to be accepted. We are social creatures. And the more acceptance you have and the more clout you have, the more money you can make. And the more things you can get for free. Because we do like to give wealthy people or famous people free stuff. And there's usually an ulterior motive behind it. But then again, this is America. Ulterior motives, we're used to them. The end-all be-all is that narcissism comes from a place of insecurity. Gaslighting comes from an insecure place. There's a difference there. A place of insecurity means that's an internal thing. An insecure place means, okay, I want to be somewhere else. I want to be somewhere better. And we all aspire to reach that glass ceiling, and we all admire those, or a lot of us admire those people who have reached it. And a lot of us don't have the education, thank you, America, for in our American education system, which is, what is it, 19th in literacy, 27th in math, and so on and so forth. Like, it's bad. We are not number one anymore in a lot of ways. A lot of ways, and we should be. To be one of the wealthiest countries and most technologically advanced countries in the world, our education system sucks. Which is why people are growing up. We've got babies raising babies, raising babies, at least 2 generations worth. And we have we have kids raising kids. They don't know. And that's what a lot of, I guess, gaslighters and narcissists count on. Is, number one, when you're in it, it's hard to get out. Because that sense of privilege and comfort. And plus, there's also a sense of gratification in, I guess you could say, dominating somebody else. I mean, the extreme version of that would be molestation or something to that nature. But the light version of that would be living in America. And are we a totally narcissistic country? No. I happen to live with and work with people that are genuinely kind-hearted. Heck, they helped me heal. Because I've got a lifetime I was healing from. There are nice people out there. There are genuinely good people out there. And they're not the loud ones. They're not saying, notice me. The only reason I'm doing some of what I'm doing, for example, is I'm on a mission. I want to help other autistic people like me. And I want to help others, find a better place in life. That makes me feel good, in a way. But it also, not feel good, but feel assured. The Great Wall of China started with a brick or a rock. Started with one, and then more, and then more. And a snowball falling down a hill. Which, if you want to watch the previous episodes, I've got a fun story about that with my best friend, where I was roly-poly and he was thinking about pushing me down a hill. But I'm glad he didn't. I was round enough that I could have probably formed a snowball if I didn't spread my arms out and just go all completely spread eagle. I would have kept rolling. That's kind of how things tend to go, don't they? The snowball effect. We start something small, and then it continues to build. Now, we can do that, and while it continues to build, tribalism seems to build up. But on the side that I'm on, there's not really tribalism. There are inside jokes, but we all recognize one another's strengths, but we recognize the other as an individual, every one of us. At least in the people I associate with. But on the flip side, there's a don't really trust anybody mentality. There's a very guarded mentality. And I mean, I haven't talked about narcissism in relationships. I only talked about them in general society and raising children and passing it on to the next generation. It is everywhere. When people feel like they are missing something, they naturally go looking for it. And the more convenient it is, especially in a narcissistic society, the better it seems. Oh, this is quick, this is easy. But life isn't like that. If it were super easy, wouldn't everybody be doing it? And it's a shame to see where our country's at, honestly. Because we used to, at least in my ideological mind as a child, it felt like we used to be kinder to each other. But then I look at the history books, I even look at Oregon State. I didn't know that at one point, if you were African American or if you were Black American, you couldn't own land here. You were forced legally not to live in Oregon for a while. And that was overturned. I don't remember when that was overturned, but it shocked me to learn that. I mean, human race is just a misogynistic and increasingly narcissistic species. Because, I mean, we've got matriarchies and patriarchies and all of that, monarchies. We've got dictatorships. We've got would-be dictators that try to engineer insurrections. We've got all these different things pulling at us from multiple different directions, and all these commentators and all of these pseudo-experts that suddenly know something that the true experts don't. And they make a good enough argument. That's one thing our narcissists are good at. They're good at making argument and spin. And spin really isn't that hard to engineer. I still engineer that into marketing campaigns I do for others, just on a consulting basis. But yeah, spin is a real thing, and it's a form of narcissism. It is when you're trying to convince a person. But spin is also, very advantageous at times too. Like there was a commercial I pitched to a gentleman when I was doing an Uber. He was the I think CFO of Aquanet. But he was talking about fish, and I pitched him a commercial that basically inspired people from a health standpoint to learn how to cook fish. That's a good commercial. Like, I hope that somebody adopts it or something like that at some point, because it was a good commercial. I don't care who you are, and I'll prove that any day of the week. Because it inspired joy. Like, that's the thing, it inspired joy and contentment and a sense of family. Like, those are three things that are hard to argue with when you get a commercial that has all three. And I pitched that sucker on the spot. And that was a little bit bragging, if I'm being honest with myself. But I just diminished myself in front of you, all of you, right now. I just admitted a fault. I bragged a little bit. For good reason. And that's the narcissism in me. And I'm working to train it out, but it's part of our culture. We are a braggadocious nation. And quite often, it's unfounded. That's, again, previous episode. Go ahead and catch up on those episodes if you want to. Autistic Commando on YouTube. But if you want to, be fully up to speed on the conversation. The end-all be-all is we need to be better people. We need to be kinder to each other. Nicer, more respectful, more respecting. But we're not. We're focused on ourselves. And when we try to manipulate situations to benefit ourselves, that is a form of narcissism. Now, when we can empathize with others, when we can sympathize, when we can genuinely care about another person's well-being or what they're saying to us, that matters. That really, really matters. And it's amazing how small things can turn a person's bad day into a great day. Narcissists don't do that. They see somebody at a disadvantage or somebody who is having a bad day and they see an opportunity. I've spoken to people like that. I've worked for people like that. In fact, I'm actually proud of the job I did for people like that. Aristocrat Jewelry was one of them. And you'll never hear about it because I'm pretty sure the dude's dead. He OD'd. But he was the son of a millionaire. And if he didn't OD, he's very much keeping himself hidden. And for good reason. I hope he took some time to reevaluate himself and possibly get over the narcissism he had. Because he had literal playbooks. And there are guys like The Art of Dating and all that, or The Art of Seduction, or whatever those books are. That's pure narcissism. Often using NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. But pretty much manipulation in every culture and every religion is wrong. Well, every religion except the weird ones. We call those cults. But they all tell us to be better people and to respect one another and all of that, and we're just not doing that in this country. We aren't. We're polarized. And part of the narcissism that we've been exuding is seeking self-privilege even at the detriment of others because others don't matter that much. That's the mask argument right there. Boom. So we've got the choice to move forward today. I'm not going to say tomorrow, I'm going to say today. You've got the choice to move forward through today and be better people, or we've got the choice to be selfish It's up to you what you do. But if you want to be a good person, start with letting somebody else in traffic. Maybe wear a mask, because I'm going to go back to wearing one. I'm fully vaccinated, and I'm going to wear a mask. Why? Because if there's even an iota of a chance that I can save one of your loved ones by doing so, I gladly do so. It's not a control mechanism. It's one of those things where it's biology. So, you folks stay safe out there. If you haven't been vaccinated, don't be afraid of it. And we'll catch you next week. And don't be a narcissist. Grr. All right. And Autistic Commando. Well, that was the show. Now stay safe out there, all right?